Hello, hi. Today I wanted to go over my tentative TBR. Also, my name is Teresa. I say tentative TBR because I am more of a mood reader, but there are certain books that I would very much like to get to in 2025. Some of these books I also wanted to get to in 2024, but what can we say? It might not happen. Hence, tentative. And I have split this into four categories. We have the books that I physically own, the books that I want to read that have been challenged, banned, or suppressed, particularly in Florida, but also some of these are just widely banned across the US for various reasons. The next category is my anticipated releases that are on my TBR for 2025, and then the last is miscellaneous. These are going to be books that are a part of a series that I'm reading, but I do not own those books, as well as books that have been recommended to me or books that I'm like, I really want to get to this year in particular. So let's start with the books that I own. So the first book is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now, this is considered to be a classic. It is about these sisters. Fuck if I know their names. This is about Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. God, I'm terrible with names. It's set in the 19th century and it follows them growing up basically into womanhood, one could say. And I very much liked the BBC short series, what is that called? Mini series? I think it's by BBC. I really like that mini series by them for Little Women. I liked Greta Gerwig's film. I waited literally years for it to be on a streaming service, and it was very anticipated for me for that reason, and I thought it was all right. I did really like Florence Pugh's performance in it, and I love Saoirse Ronan? Saoirse, what's her last name? And why can't I remember it? Yeah, Saoirse Ronan. I love her so much. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the mini series much more though. Next on the list is Emma by Jane Austen. I love these Barnes and Noble soft but hardcover editions. I think they're so pretty, and I love the simple sprayed edges. There's a bit of dust on there. I love the interiors. I love everything about it. I love the ribbon. And Emma, I loved the most recent adaptation starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Mia Goth, as well as others. I loved that. That was impeccable. And I want to read more about Mr. Knightley and Emma, what's her name? Woodstock? It's not Woodhouse. Emma Woodhouse. I want to read more about Emma Woodhouse in Mr. Knightley's romance. Actually read it for the first time. Very excited to get to this, but this is much thicker than Pride and Prejudice or Persuasion. Next up, we have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I have this beautiful edition. I believe it's from Easton Press, Easton Press. So yes, this beautiful edition of Wuthering Heights is by Easton Press, and I got it at a second-hand bookshop. Love them. I honestly have never really been interested in Wuthering Heights for some reason, and I could not tell you much about it, but I can look it up. Wuthering Heights is an estate, and something happens with Heathcliff and Catherine in this gothic novel from the early 1900s. Sorry, novel from the late 1800s, mid 1800s. Next on this list is the entire Daevabad trilogy. I want to reread it. This is my favorite trilogy, and I wanted to reread it last year because I have some fancy editions that I bought from the Bookish box. I don't want to get them down. Sorry. Maybe some other time I'll show them, but I really don't feel like getting up right now. So The City of Brass follows Nari, who is a con woman on the streets of Cairo during Napoleonic times, 18th century. Maybe that's Napoleonic times. I don't know. I don't remember yesterday. How am I supposed to remember other people's lives? And she's a con woman. She also does healing, and she passes it off as like herbal healing, but she actually like realizes it's magical, but she's kind of gaslighting herself about that. She summons a djinn named Dara who is looking to go to the city of Brass, which is full of djinn. It's his home. And he is taking Nari because he realizes that she can heal, that she's special, that there's something up with her, as well as the fact that they are being chased by these evil entities. Our second point of view is Alizad, who is a prince of the city of Brass, and he is at odds with his father who rules. His father is ruthless, and Alizad is trying to find a way to help the people in need. And so we follow these three characters, Dara, Alizad, and Nari, on their journey to and in the city of Brass. 5-star trilogy. It's amazing. I love it. I love it so much. The next one is going to be the rest of the Full Metal Alchemist manga series. I read this as a teenager and I want to finish my reread of it. I am only showing you volume 4 because that is the volume that I am on, and I don't have all of the Full Metal editions. I do have most of the ones I bought as a teenager, but with the Full Metal editions, I'm missing a few volumes, and also that would be a very big and heavy stack, and I'm not going to do that. Full Metal Alchemist follows two brothers, Edward and Alphonse Elric, on their journey to bring their bodies back after having lost part of them, in Alphonse's case, his entire body, while trying to use alchemy to bring back their mother. As a result of that, they are looking for the Philosopher's Stone, and they have, well, Edward has become a state alchemist, a dog of the military, to use their resources and to journey across this country that they're in. What is it? Ooh, it's like Armistice or something? Amestris, in search of knowledge that can help them make or find the Philosopher's Stone to get their bodies back. It's very good. I love it so much. I'm excited to read it. It's just sometimes I tend to be like, well, it's going to be a quicker read than a book, so I might as well read a book, which you would think I would have the opposite logic, that I would want to read it because it is quicker than a book, but that's not how it works up here, unfortunately. The next book that I want to read is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is not the only romance on here, but this is one that has been on my TBR for a while, and I've owned it for a while. I honestly know nothing about it, and I kind of don't want to know anything about it going in, because that's how I like, honestly, most of my books. I don't want to know anything. That way it can either exceed expectations or fall short of expectations. So I'm excited to read it, though. I've heard great things about it. So super excited. Next up is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. I like Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, and I want to read her Napoleonic Dragon books, but have not yet. This one, I hear, is kind of like a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. Am I wrong about this? So I do want to read this. I did like Spinning Silver. I thought the prose was a little dry. I'll describe it as that. I found the prose of Spinning Silver a little dry, so it did take me a while to get through what I consider a shorter book. And so I think I'm afraid of that happening with this as well. So that's why I've hesitated while owning this book for over 2 years. But I do want to read it. I promise I want to read it. Also, I love the little fact about Naomi Novik is that she helped create or created Archive of Our Own. Love her for that. Next up is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I actually bought this before I read Love Hypothesis, because at first I was like, I want to read out some Ali Hazelwood. I want to try Ali Hazelwood, but I don't want to read the Rayloaf book. So I picked up Love Theoretically instead on Pango Book. I don't know anything about this, so I'm interested to see what it's about. I am kind of weary because I have also read Bride. While I really like the Love Hypothesis, I did not really like Bride a whole lot, so maybe I'll like this one. I hope it's not the same tropes. I've heard it is, so I've been reluctant to read it. It's also thicker than the Love Hypothesis, I feel. I don't know why I'm saying that. I didn't physically read the Love Hypothesis. I read it on Kindle. The next book is The Silver Bullets of Annie Oakley by Mercedes Lackey. Mercedes Lackey is a very prolific fantasy author who, when is this? I want to say she's like 80s to 90s. She's written so much. Is this a newer book? When was this published? So I thought this was like a book from the 90s. This was published in 2022. I want to read a Mercedes Lackey's book, so I thought this historical fiction one would be interesting, and also Western. I have not read many Westerns, so I'll let you know how this goes. Next up is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. This is about Henry VIII, but told through the perspective of Thomas Cromwell. I have heard rumblings about this book from one specific person. Just the talk of it has actually made me really want to read it. Another person who I saw talk about this was actually Ava Reed when talking about her inspiration for Lady Macbeth. She mentioned Hilary Mantel. So when I saw this at a secondhand bookstore, I wanted to get my hands on it. Yeah, and I do like Henry VIII, and when I say that, I mean I like the history surrounding him. I don't like him as a person at all. The next book is The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. I have read her in college, and I honestly have not read her since, but I wanted to, so I picked this up one day while I was at Barnes & Noble. It has won the National Book Award. I did not see that until right now. I picked it up through name recognition. I do not know what this is about, but from scanning the back, it seems that it is going to be about a case of a Native woman who is attacked, and it goes over that entire case. So I'm sure it's going to be a super emotional read, and I'm excited to tackle it. This one actually is going to be a crossover into our next section, which is the banned, suppressed, and challenged books. And this I'm actually reading this month for a book club, so this is going to be crossed off my list very quickly. This is going to be for Reads with Rachel's Julie Hates This book club pick for January, which is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I do not know much about this book at all, but I know that book banners really dislike a few books by Toni Morrison, this being one of them. So I am excited to read this, even though I know very little about it. Continuing on with Toni Morrison, we have Beloved, which I want to read. I started Beloved a few years back when I checked it out from my then county library, but the due date was closer than I expected, and I didn't get around to finishing it, but I will read it this year. And it is a novel that is set in the period after the Civil War, and it follows a family in Cincinnati that is haunted by a malevolent spirit. The family is a family of former slaves and is inspired by Margaret Garner, who was enslaved in Kentucky but escaped to Ohio. And the third book that I want to read by Toni Morrison this year is Song of Solomon, which follows Macon Milkman Dead III, who is an African American man who is living in Michigan, and it follows him from birth to adulthood. The next book on this list is going to be Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and this is a graphic novel story that tells the story of Art Spiegelman's father, who was a prisoner at Auschwitz and who is Jewish. And it depicts this through making the Jewish people mice, the Nazis cats, and I'm pretty sure the Poles are pigs. So it's a very famous graphic novel. I have started this when I was visiting a public library, but I only got to page 120 something, so this is a book that I would like to finish this year. The next book is Genderqueer, a memoir by Maya Kobabe. Genderqueer is a memoir that depicts Kobabe's struggle with his gender identity, self-identity, and Ayer's crushes throughout Ayer's life, and discusses topics such as gender euphoria, gender dysphoria, and asexuality. And this is highly challenged in Florida in particular, because they believe talk of sexuality of any kind is not a subject to be discussed with kids, which I think is a really ignorant take on just adolescence, because it is what they will run into regardless. And so having discussions about it is something that should be happening. They should have numerous sources of information of where they should be learning about these things, because they are going to run into people who do not follow the gender binary. They are going to run into gay people, asexual people, trans people. Books like this help facilitate conversation, helps show how to be empathetic to where a person is coming from. And it's just wild to me how people do not understand the amount of control of participation that they have in their child's life, the discussions that they can have around it, and just it's wild to me how they don't want their children to learn empathy for other people, even if they don't quite understand the life of another person. But that's just me. But yes, I do want to read a genderqueer this year. Another book that I want to read is The Breakaways, which is a graphic novel by Kathy G. Johnson, and it is about this girl named Faith who is a part of a soccer team that is actually particularly awful, and just their navigation through these challenges, and explores friendship, identity, and unity through this book. It is a diverse cast of characters, which book banners hate. So I love. Even though sports fiction isn't really for me, I'm gonna read this book. The next book is Prince and Knight by Daniel Hack and Stevie Lewis. It is a children's picture book that is about a knight and a prince, and they fight dragons and then they fall in love. It seems very wholesome, and then I'm gonna give that children's book to my niece probably. But yeah, I just want to read it to know what's so offensive about it that it's being challenged in schools and public libraries. Next up is Nita Hawes' Nightmare Blog by Rodney Barnes and Jason Sean Alexander. Now, I worked in a comic book shop for a number of years, and I was working there when this comic book series came out, and I thought it looked cool. I probably have the first what the fuck is it called? The first issue. I probably have the first issue in my closet of shame, and I just have not read it, unfortunately. And this is a horror comic that is tied into another comic called Philadelphia, which I haven't also read. But in this universe, there are vampires and demons, and Nita Hawes is on a quest to root out evil in her city, and she's also being haunted by the ghost of her dead brother. That is in my challenged and banned suppressed list, but I actually am unsure of why it would be on that list. Well, I can think of one reason: people are racist. But I also can't think of how it came up when I was looking at what I wanted to read for next year. So I'm pretty sure it belongs on this list. Either way, I'm going to read it in 2025. The next book is The House of Spirits by Isabel Allende. And this story features the Truba family, which it spans 4 generations and talks about post-colonial social and political upheaval in Chile. It's told through 2 perspectives and incorporates elements of magical realism, but although never directly named, it draws parallels to certain historical figures in Chile's history. And I think the discussion of those figures is probably why it is being challenged. I mean, Julie Gebhardt, who is a book challenger and general menace over in Hillsborough County, Florida, who loves to ban books, was complaining about a children's book about Pablo Neruda because he's a communist. So even though this book did not discuss communism in any way, just because the author is a communist and she has no idea what that means, she wanted it out of schools. So that's probably why this one is being challenged as well. The next one is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and it is a book told in verse. Oh my gosh. I almost said prose, and I'm like, that is not correct. It is a book told in verse that follows the life of Zamara Batista as she is growing up and feels unheard. And I'm excited to read that. And that is all for that section. Next, I'm going to talk about what is most anticipated. My first anticipated book of 2025 is Fable or the End of the World by Ava Reid. It is a dual point of view sapphic YA dystopian that is marketed as The Last of Us meets Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And it's by Ava Reid, so I'm gonna read it. I love her books, so there was little that I needed to be persuaded. It's going to be so good. Next is The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia, another author that I insta-buy from. And this is going to follow 3 women across 3 generations, each dealing with witchcraft. And it's a horror novel. Silvia Moreno Garcia is one of the first books that I read by her, was Mexican Gothic, and I loved it so much. And I'm excited to see what else she does with horror. Next is I Am Made of Death by Kelly Andrew. I, this past year, read Your Bones, My Blood, Your Blood, My Bones by her, and it was very, very good. I had very little to complain about for it, and I really liked the characters of it. So when I heard that she was making this really interesting dark romance, and I'm not a dark romance girly at all, when I heard she was making this about a ballerina whose love interest is her bodyguard, and she is like this really dangerous person who does not speak. I thought it was so interesting. And I was like, okay, I trusted you once. I'm going to trust you again. I'm going to read it. I'm not telling you guys at all when these books come out. Jesus. So I Am Made of Death comes out March 4th, 2025. The Bewitching comes out just after my birthday. I'm so excited for it. July 15th, 2025. Fable for the End of the World comes out March 4th, 2025. The last book on this list is Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. I honestly think R.F. Kuang, in my opinion, is getting better with each book that she puts out. I enjoyed The Poppy Wars. I really, really liked Babel, and I loved Yellowface, so I'm very excited for Catabasis, and I really like that she's doing similarly to Silvia Moreno Garcia. She is not sticking to a particular genre. I really like my authors who write typically singular books, standalone books, and just play with the genre and all that stuff. So I'm excited for this. This is supposed to be a romance novel, which I have liked the little sprinklings that R.F. Kuang has given us of romance in the Poppy Wars and in Babel, and I have been infuriated by not seeing them come to fruition. I have been infuriated not seeing them come to pass. So I think she does an amazing job with that, with hurting me that way, because there's the potential there, but I really do want to see her write a romance, and I'm excited because this is being described as a romance and fantasy and historical fiction. I'm so excited for it. And it's basically these 2 students who are traveling to the underworld to retrieve their professor. Sounds so good. I'm so excited for this, unbelievably so. I like R.F. Kuang, but I wasn't sitting on the edge of my seat to read Yellowface. I read it and I really liked it. But with this, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And then there was the apparent teasing of the cover. I don't know if it's the actual cover or not, but it looked pretty cool, to be honest. I'm excited. I can't say more. I'm literally speechless and can't articulate how much I cannot wait for this book. And I'm not going to tell you when it comes out. It comes out August 28th, 2025. So it's the last of the 4 that's coming out, which pains me. hurts so good. Then for our last category, we have our miscellaneous, which the first on this list is going to be the continuation of a reread that I'm doing. I've only read the first book, which is rereading The Hunger Games. And I have read The Hunger Games, and I need to read Catching Fire and Mockingjay next. The next one is Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. This is on my list because my husband is getting into reading really, and this book he is very excited about, and he sold it to me. Basically, the way he described it, I wanted to read it and see for myself what is up with it. This recounts the life of Valen al-Sorna, who is at a young age admitted into the Sixth Order, an order that is devoted to battle. He is trained to be austere, celibate, and live the dangerous life of a warrior of the faith. And they tell him from the beginning that he has no other family except the order now. And in the beginning, it's interesting. I'm not going to say what it is. No, I am. In the beginning, it's interesting because we start with Valen on the day he is to be executed. And there is a man who shows up who is there to take the record of Valen's life. And that is how this story is presented to us, is him reflecting on his life. I am reading it on audio right now. I have trouble with fantasy on audio. Like, I feel like I miss a lot more. To be honest, that's how I read The Poppy Wars for the first time, and I feel like I missed a little bit from that. I do think it affected my reading in a more negative way than audiobooks normally do. So I also have the Libby book, and I'm going to be switching those two formats as I read it, but I am reading it. Next up, I really want to get into Robin Hobb, so I want to do The Assassin's Apprentice this year. I'm not going to say all of the Farseer series trilogy, whatever it is, but I do want to get some Robin Hobb this year. Next is the last book in An Ember in the Ashes series, which is A Sky Beyond the Storm by Saba Tahir. I really, really like the last book, and I kind of don't want it to end, but I will be reading that last book this year. Another conclusion that I don't necessarily want to happen is the last book in a Natural History of Dragons series. The Memoirs of Lady Trent is actually what that series is called. I need to read Within the Sanctuary of Wings by Marie Brennan. And A Natural History of Dragons is about a woman who, in the, I'm trying to think of what era it would be, early 1800s, 1900s-ish, fantasy, parallel Europe, that area, well, actually everywhere. It is of a naturalist, a dragonologist who explores the world studying dragons. I am explaining this series so badly. She has to overcome the prejudices against women. She defies the gender roles of her society to become a dragonologist, and she is kind of an outcast from society from then on as she pursues this, and it basically, each book is a part of her journey studying dragons. It's very interesting. It's a world that's very fleshed out, and with each book we get to experience a new culture within the world. It's so good. If you like an encyclopedia of fairies but you want something that is dragons instead, but if you are interested in dragons as well, then this may be for you. I will say it is less on the romance side as an encyclopedia of fairies, but it has that same tone. So if that sounds interesting to you, give it a try. And I'm going to be finishing up that series this year. The rest of the books on this list are going to be ones that have been recommended to me based off of my reading taste. So I would like to get to all of these this year, but I don't know if that's going to happen. The first of these is Tess of the Road by Rachel Hartman. From the brief description, it is about a woman who pretends to be a boy to basically escape the plans for the future that her family has laid out for her. It's fantasy. I'm excited to read it. This is probably one of the ones that I'm most excited to read based off of recommendations to me. Next is The Saint of Bright Doors by Bara Chandraskera. Now, this has been on my TBR for a little bit now, but it was also recommended to me, so it bumped it up a little bit higher. This is a queer urban fantasy that I don't know a whole lot about. It is, from the brief synopsis, I can tell you that it has revolutionaries and cults in it, which honestly are such a selling point for me. Next is Middle Game by Shannon McGuire. This is another one that was on my TBR that was recommended, so it got bumped up. And it involves alchemy. That's one thing that I know it involves, honestly. That's why it was put on my TBR in the first place. And it also involves shadowy organizations. And the synopsis says impossible cities. I'm curious as to what that means. And it's a standalone, so I'm excited to read it. Next up is The Library at Mount Shar by Scott Hawkins. And I know nothing about this book. I will read you the first 3 lines that are in the synopsis. A missing god, a library with the secrets to the universe, a woman too busy to notice her heart slipping away. That's pretty good. That has me sold like right away. This next one, I am surprised I didn't hear about it before, and that's A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. It is queer. It is described as space opera. It involves political intrigue, which I'm very interested in. So, on my list. And the last is The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. This takes place in the same universe as the Shades of Magic trilogy, which I DNF'd the last book of. But I really enjoyed The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, or as the book banner of Clay County would write, Adu LaRue. I've been looking at a document about book banning for too long, and you would think book banners would at least learn the names of the books and authors that they are trying to ban. But different note entirely. Not on topic at all. I really enjoyed The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And so I am willing to give V.E. Schwab quite a few chances before I say that she is not for me. Infinite chances, probably, just like I did with Leigh Bardugo. Even though I'm not in love with her book, this could be towards V.E. Schwab or Leigh Bardugo, take your pick. I will still read them. This series follows Anu Antari, which is this magical person who can travel between the dimensions of this world. Jeez, this is so fucking long. I just looked at the page count of this book. Ugh. It would be a very ambitious book to read in 2025. That's why this is called Tentative. We'll see if I follow through with it. But Catabasis, guys. I am so excited for Catabasis. I'm gonna leave it on that high note. Catabasis! That is my tentative TBR for 2025. Let me know what books you are going to read down below in the comments, whether you're excited to read them, dragging your feet with them, or torturing yourself by reading them. Let me know what you're reading this year. And bye!